Madison County League of Women Voters. This forum is being hosted by both the League and the Madison County, News Record and Sentinel of Madison County. It's our pleasure to welcome you to this event for this evening's candidate for forum for state representative and state House of Representatives and state Senate. The Madison County League of Women Voters, whose members are all unpaid volunteers, is best known for our candidate forums. But we do more, such as registering students at Madison High School, which we'll be doing next week, and at other times during the year. Our Observer Corps monitors some county meetings and provides a report to the News Record and Sentinel, which prints them for your information as space permits. We also host forums about issues of importance to the county throughout the year. We invite you, men as well as women, to join the League. Information and membership applications are on the table in the lobby. If you appreciate our activities, there's also a donation jar there, and any amount is appreciated. Some ground rules. Please turn off your cell phones to avoid distraction. There will be no direct questioning of the candidates. Instead, you are offered a 3x5 card as you entered on which to write a question to any or all of the candidates. These cards were collected and screened for duplication in order to present as many questions as time allows. Please hold any applause or verbal comment until the conclusion of the forum. Candidates will have 2 minutes to explain why are you running for this office and what are your qualifications. As their opening statement, then questioning will begin. Candidates have 1 minute to respond. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Our timekeeper, Cheryl Williams, will signal the time remaining and the cutoff for each candidate's response. I now turn over the evening to our moderator, Dr. Diane Lunson. Thank you, Dr. Lunson.
Thank you all for being here tonight, the second night of the week for candidate forums, and I will raise this one up for a moment, but I'm not going to do what I did Tuesday night. I'm not going to stand for 2 hours in one place. There was a time I could do that. That time has long since passed. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for the League and for the Times Sentinel for hosting these events. Thank you for the 3 candidates who are present for this discussion this evening. I want to, again, thank the League. I also want to thank Beverly, my wife. We were on the way here, and I'd forgotten my reading glasses. And I have about a dozen pair. One's in my truck, and one's in, all the places. But I didn't have one in her car. So if they look a tad bit odd, they are. Better than my not being able to see. So thank you, Beverly, for sharing your reading glasses. We'll add some to your car now. I have attempted to, put these in some sense of order. There are a lot of questions, and I will ask you to be attentive to the timekeeper here. As has been said, you'll be given at the introduction time chance to say why you're running for this office and what your qualifications are. And then I will come back with the very first question, beginning with Senator Heist, and then the very same question to Ms. Shongle, and then the very same question to Mr. Wheeler, and then it's question number 2, we'll start in the middle and so forth. Everybody gets to answer the same question once, unless you want to do an enhancement in your closing, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So any questions of me at the moment? Okay. The very first question is this. This November ballot coming up has 6 constitutional amendments on the ballot. I am not going to ask you to address all 6. We don't have that much time. But I am going to ask you to pick either, not both, either one that you favor the most or the least, and explain your position on that. So whichever one it is you wish to speak about is fine, matters not. And you tell us whether you like it or it's the least or the most. Each of you get to pick your own.
What about the next one?
I'll come to that in just a second. Thank you very much. I do need to be prompted. I'm using not my reading glasses, you see. But I wanted them to have that honesty, so that you could process that a bit, and you don't have to address that in your opening remarks. So we'll begin with Senator Heiss, and then Ms. Shonwell, and then Ms. Wheeler on your opening remarks, and then that will be the very first question. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for this opportunity to come again here. I think this is the 4th event that I've been able to participate in with the League of Women Voters. You know, I ran for office. This would be my 5th term serving in the North Carolina Senate. Prior to that, I served 2 terms as the mayor of the town of Spruce Pine. I've really been involved in politics in Western North Carolina all my life. I started my first race when I was 11 years old, working at the polls and handing out cards. One of the things I've always felt is a huge challenge is that our values in Western North Carolina just aren't reflected in Raleigh. When you look at what big cities are trying to push through and do, but in 2010, we actually made a change in North Carolina. And we actually had Western North Carolina and its conservative values heard for the first time. We were able to do things like pass a marriage amendment so that our Constitution in North Carolina still says that the marriage between one man and one woman is the only legally recognized union. You know, Raleigh loses its mind a lot. And we spent most of the last 2 years in a debate over who goes into which bathroom. Something that's quite crazy to most of us here in Western North Carolina. There are settled things, but when it comes to the way things are portrayed in Raleigh, it's hard to get Western North Carolina's voice in place. And I'm glad to be able to make that my focus and to continue to do that. Over the 4 years, I have constantly been recognized as one of the most effective legislators in the state of North Carolina, and I will continue to represent the values of Western North Carolina in Raleigh.
Just making sure it's working. Thank you. Let me begin by thanking the Madison County League of Women Voters for holding this very important forum tonight, and to each person that is here for participating in this, our important democracy. I am Rhonda Cole Shandoval, and I'm running for the House in this district, District 118, which includes all of Madison County, all of Yancey County, and part of Haywood County. Now, I know that when every election rolls around, people say, this is the most important election of our lifetime. Well, people, this may very well be the most important election of our lifetime. But it's not an election about labels. It's about the legacy that we leave for our children and for our neighbors. You see, labels can only tell us so much about a person, but do they really tell the whole story? My son, Kami, which many of you know, began public school over 25 years ago in Haywood County. And as a disabled student, he had an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. Now, while this plan is very useful, it also required my late husband and me to put a label on him. While we understood the importance and necessity of this, it didn't begin to tell the entire story of who my sweet Kami was and is to this day. Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, libertarians, conservatives, progressives, whatever you choose to call yourself is fine. But whatever the label, we must choose to fight the mantra of divide and conquer It starts right here in Madison County, in District 118, to conquer this divide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lunsford. Thank you, League of Women Voters. My name is David Wheeler. I, like Senator Hayes, live in Mitchell County year-round. I'm proud of my heritage. We have 3 children. My wife and I have 3 children that were born here in North Carolina. And I'm a small business person that's worked for himself since I was 24 years old. I've created jobs throughout my life. I've met budgets. I have had to not pay myself in the past. There are months, including February's, where I haven't had any pay. I am in this race to do one thing, well, several things. Primary is to stop the partisan bickering. All that's going on in Raleigh, in my opinion, is the Republicans trying to one-up the Democrats and the Democrats trying to one-up the Republicans. It's got to stop because nothing is getting done. Ralph says our values are not being reflected in Raleigh. I couldn't agree more. Our values are not being reflected in Raleigh because most of the folks in Raleigh are reflecting the PACs. They give them money. If you vote for me and you elect me your senator, we're going to talk about the future, not the past. HB2, gay marriage, it's ancient history. It's over. It's solved. Why do we have to keep going back to that? Why? It's to try and manipulate folks into voting for them. It's an issue that's been solved. It's over and done with. I want to look forward, not back.
Thank you all for your intro remarks, and now we will begin with the question of pick one of the 6 amendments on the ballot, your choice, whether you're for or against, and speak about that one amendment. Senator Heiss, you go first.
Well, thank you, and as a member of the Senate, I have supported all 6 constitutional amendments and helped to draft them and put them on the ballot. And there's a lot of important things there, putting the right to hunt and fish, lowering the maximum tax rate in the state of North Carolina. But one of the biggest challenges we have to a governance in North Carolina that is really equally divided is our judiciary. North Carolina has a very odd provision that every vacancy in the North Carolina judiciary is filled by one person. The governor of the state of North Carolina, without any oversight, he gets recommendations, doesn't have to follow them. And so we have a judicial vacancy amendment that will have individuals nominate to a local commission. The commission will determine qualified or not qualified. Those will then go to the General Assembly, who will select at minimum of 2 names to recommend to the governor to which from appointment. This takes the power of one individual and places it back to the people of North Carolina and their representation. And 20% a year of our judicial seats become vacant and are appointed by the governor. So over his term, nearly 40% of the judicial branch is appointed solely by the governor. This would change that.
Thank you. Ms. Shonhoff?
Amending the Constitution is a very important process, one that we should not take lightly. While some of these amendments are good, we are basically handing our General Assembly a blank check. If we approve these amendments, which we do not know exactly how they are going to be written, we're giving them a blank check and letting them write whatever they want to. So for that reason and that reason alone, I have to say that I'm not supporting any of them.
Mr. Wheeler?
Let's be honest. It's a power grab. It's a complete bald-faced power grab by the legislature who doesn't like this current governor. Now, when they get the next governor in, if it's a Republican, they'll switch it back. Let's be honest, it's a pure and simple power grab. And for that reason alone, on principle, I'm not for any of these. I'm a fish and hunt. I fish and hunt all the time. I don't have a problem with fish and hunting. I'm not sure it needs to be in the Constitution. What are we going to do? What's next? We're going to put tennis playing into the Constitution? What about arrows? Should we put arrows into the Constitution? I'm just, the total power grab that this legislature did on this is a bald-faced power grab. And I'm against it, and I'm against the partisan bickering. There wasn't one Democrat that had any input on these amendments. They were done in secret, and then they were foisted upon us. And the fact that the federal government had to step in at one point to review them means they probably weren't very fair, because federal courts don't take these sorts of things unless they're not being fair. So, for those reasons, I'm against it. Nix, all 6.
Thank you. Next question, we have certainly understand with great clarity the tragedy of the hurricane in eastern North Carolina. And we've certainly seen evidence of the ripple effect, no pun intended, of hog waste ponds failing, coal ash ponds failing, and that's eastern North Carolina, but we are North Carolina. And there have been equally weather events in western North Carolina. A number of years ago, major mudslides in Haywood County. So the question that's posed is, what is your position about enhancing and enforcing regulations for the safe disposal of toxic waste, whether it be animal waste or residue from power generation or any other kind of operation that must be processed? So this second question now goes to Ms. Sandoval first.
We must absolutely protect our environment and make it more difficult for things, tragedies like is happening down east to happen. We have to protect our clean water, our air, and hold these big businesses accountable for what they are doing. We can't let this continue to happen, and it's a tragedy that is happening down east, and we certainly cannot let this happen here in the mountains of western North Carolina.
Once again, the legislature steps in. The legislature, this is a fact, has voted that no decision can be made based upon climate change. No regulation in the state government regarding pollution, regarding the oceans rising, can be based upon any data or anything related to climate change. Does that make any sense to anyone in this room? Now, I know it makes sense to one person who voted for it. I also know that the legislature lessened the liability that hog farms would have for pollution. Okay, I'm sorry to rail, but who do these folks represent? Seriously. In both these instances, it's big business that wants these things changed. What about us? Who do these folks represent? When I get to Raleigh, guys, it's all about you and the people of this district. PACs and corporations, they've had it good for a long time. It's time we took care of our people.
Senator Rice?
Thank you. Good for a long time. That's the way they portray how farmers have had it in North Carolina. We have industries right now that are doing everything possible through legal methods to shut down and end hog farming in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina, who is the largest hog producer on the East Coast, because they think it smells bad. That was really the whole basis of the lawsuit. hog farm smells bad. Therefore, we're going to sue and destroy. You know, another government regulation. There is no regulation we pass that does not cost the taxpayers of the state of North Carolina. There is not a regulation we pass that does not destroy industry in the state of North Carolina. And so it is time we take the opposite approach. It is time we start letting businesses not only be liable for their damages, but unregulated and destroyed by government, that we end that process. If you want to destroy an industry in North Carolina, you regulate it. That has been the history of our Department of Environmental Quality, and that is why we have taken a lot of the actions we have as a General Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. Wheeler, we will begin with you on this next question. And it is, do you support Medicaid expansion, and if so, why? If not, why not? And do you know what the cost might be if it were to be expanded? Medicaid expansion.
This is a no-brainer again. It's $30 billion over 10 years the federal government's offering us. This money comes from California, New York, Illinois, Florida. It's our money. It's sitting there. It cost us $3 billion. We have a 10% match. However, the chairman of the Health Services Committee, who's sitting right here at this table tonight, is the sole individual holding up Medicaid expansion in this state. I'm for Medicaid expansion as long as we close loopholes so we don't have people fraudulently getting into the system. As long as we increase practitioners' pay. They haven't been increased in over 6 years. As long as dentists get an increase. They haven't had an increase in their fee schedule in 12 years. And the fourth thing I want is I want a body that's going to oversee and have input here in North Carolina that isn't run by the legislature, that's run by people that can call out nonsense, make policies based upon facts and not upon politics. The sole reason this has not been done is politics. And those days have to come to an end, guys, or we're going to wreck this entire state.
Senator Hines?
Thank you. I guess I will take that mantle as being the sole individual, although I don't think it's true, of stopping the expansion of Obamacare in the state of North Carolina.
Talking about Medicaid, huh?
Medicaid expansion was part of the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
Obamacare.
Right, but that's long ago.
Excuse me. Mr. Hines, please.
Thank you. Right now in North Carolina, 1 out of every 5 people is covered by Medicaid. 59% of the births last year in North Carolina were covered by Medicaid. But all we hear is how we need more Medicaid in the state. The expansion population, which is estimated to be about 600,000 people, is 80% able-bodied adult males between the ages of 18 and 55. The population we talk about. There is nothing about the expansion of Medicaid that affects children, pregnant women. Our standards in North Carolina are already higher than the expansion population standards. It's coming in. The challenge in North Carolina for better health care is to extend the private insurance market, to get individuals back to work with private insurance. If a hospital exceeds 80% of their population as being Medicare and Medicaid, the hospital cannot be profitable in North Carolina. And with expansion, every rural hospital in the state of North Carolina would now exceed that 80% threshold. It is the private insurance payers that make a hospital or a doctor's office capable of surviving, particularly in rural areas. And as you expand the government programs, you will destroy health care in Western North Carolina.
Ms. Shonda?
I absolutely support expanding Medicaid. It's just the morally right thing to do. Let's join the 33 other states in this great nation who have already expanded Medicaid. More than 860, almost 900 working people in Madison County alone would benefit if we expanded Medicaid. And that doesn't include what this would do for our economy. expanding Medicaid is an economic engine and job maker. It's also going to help us with treatment options for this horrible opioid epidemic that is destroying our communities.
Thank you. Our next question, response will come first from Senator Hines, and it is this. What is your interest and or plans for any expansion of preschool education, especially Smart Start? Thank you.
Thank you. We've actually had, over the last 4 budgets, we've gone a process of expanding slots for Smart Start programs as well as More at 4 programs all across the state. Early childhood education is something that I have been a strong proponent of, was named as their legislator of the year for early childhood development last year, and also sought to actually expand, if those know, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which is now a partnership with Smart Start, so that every child now in the state of North Carolina, aged birth to 5, will receive a book every month at home that is age appropriate, and that's a partnership we as a state have now entered into in making sure that's occurred. We really have a capacity problem in Western North Carolina, 5-star quality centers that exist in Western North Carolina, and having enough slots available to enough individuals to be able to get into those centers. We really need an expansion of more centers within this state. There's a lot of regulation and difficulties around that, which slows down expansion. You just can't throw out 100,000 new slots in Western North Carolina because we just don't have the quality slots available to fill them. We have began that process year after year of increasing those slots and pairing with increases. Actually, Senator Burr has gotten in federal funding as well, so that each year we're increasing those slowly, but we are doing what we can to expand capacity and make that option more available for students in the entire birth to 5 age range.
Thank you, Ms. Honeywell.
We have to invest in our children before they begin in our public school system. If we don't invest in the front end, we're going to end up investing when they're older. These people are going to end up in our prison systems, and that is not cost effective, nor again is it the morally right thing for us to be doing in a state, in the United States, in the wealthiest country in the world. We know that we have to begin early. We have to train and educate these minds as soon as we can. I like to tell the story about in 1969, when I was 5 years old, there was no public education. There was no kindergarten in our public schools. And my parents knew how important it was to get to that young mind early. And they scraped and sacrificed and saved to send my brother and me to a private kindergarten. But in 1976, North Carolina started their kindergarten program in our public schools because they agreed with my parents. They knew that how important it is to train that early mind.
Mr. Wheeler?
Pre-K and early education is obviously important. I've got a 2.5-year-old, I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and it's darn important to me personally. I think we need to invest more money, more time, more effort into that. What you hear from Raleigh is, we'll talk about it, we'll study it, let's think about it. Where's the action? Where's the dough? Where's the money for our teachers? Where's the money for the pre-K? We have a capacity problem. Well, fix the capacity problem. Find some way in order to fix it. That's what folks in Raleigh send us to do, is fix problems. Not identify them, talk about them forever, and then do nothing. Identify, talk about it, fix it. I want to go back to Medicaid for a second. Ralph says there's a bunch of lazy men, essentially, that need Medicare. You're darn right there is. There's 400,000 people. Some of those people are disabled. Some of them are veterans. Some of those folks have disabilities that they need help with. We're talking about people, Senator. We're not talking about just money. And you know what? Here's the saddest part. When we don't expand Medicaid, 1,000 people per year are dying in this state. 1,000 people. Because we can't find a way to take $30 billion from the federal government and help people. I think that is preposterous.
Okay, next question. I think this next question will begin with Shondaval. I've got my sequence still in order. We'll stay with the issue of children. How do you feel about SNAP lunch benefits for children? Shondaval.
We definitely have to invest in our SNAP program. There are children in our school system. Is this on? Can y'all hear me? Okay. There are children in our school system that are hungry. I know that each one of you know about the backpack program that y'all have in your county. We have it in Haywood County as well as they do in Yancey County. There are some children who are just not getting, they're just not getting the proper nutrients that they need to get. People are having to decide whether they're going to eat today or have money to pay for their medicine or to pay for rent or to pay for their utilities. People shouldn't have to be making these decisions. This is why I want to go to Raleigh and make sure that we are treating our middle class, our hardworking individuals like they should be treated.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm associating myself with what Rhonda's talking about. I think she and I, when we're in Raleigh, we're going to work very hard on this program and expand it. It's a federal program again. Federal money provides this. And I'm sorry to harp, but there's a lot of facts that people don't know about Senator Hayes. He introduced a bill to kick 144,000 families out of SNAP benefits. 55,000 of those were children. That, to me, doesn't sound like Western North Carolina mountain values, because a lot of those folks are in this district, and a lot of folks are hurting. And I think the last thing we should be doing is pulling benefits for children and families that are poor. Now, if they're abusing the system, kick them out, put them in jail. If they're not, help them. We're here to help. That's what you all hire us to do. We work for you. It's not the other way around. Industry doesn't tell us what to do and then we do it. We work for all of you, and we need to help folks. And SNAP benefits need to be expanded, not cut, Senator.
Senator, a question, please.
Thank you. As finally someone mentioned, SNAP is actually a federal program, not a state program. It is not state dollars or others. What was actually being said, while not a bill, there was a proposal that I had introduced, part of reforming a lot of government benefits that are out there. While President Obama was running the country, as we'll say, he, without authorization from Congress, under temporary measures, expanded the thresholds for food stamps on a temporary basis. They are still expanded on a temporary basis. But your tax dollars are going to that temporary expansion that I propose that we go back to the original income thresholds, the percentages of federal poverty that were in place prior to the recession, once the recession had ended. It's the problem with every expansion. It's we make temporarily, let's do one little expansion because the economy's down. And then we watch it set permanently as we continue to place more and more people dependent on government and less dependent on themselves.
Thank you. Again, staying with the issue of children, in this sense, do you think teachers should carry guns? Mr. Wheeler, you go first.
How many in this room think teachers should carry guns. 0 for folks at home. 1. We got one guy. 1 senator, pardon me. 2, we got 2. I think 3. If teachers want to and they're qualified and they choose to and they've been authorized by the local sheriff, maybe they're a retired teacher, that might be one way to go. But I think asking teachers to take training for guns in any way is crazy. It's just setting ourselves up for problems. And now the senator's going to say I'm anti-Second Amendment. Baloney. I'm fine with the Second Amendment if you're law-abiding. I just don't think teachers should have guns. I don't think we should be training teachers to have guns in the room either.
Mr. Nice? Mr. Nice?
Thank you. I guess despite what he thinks I'm going to say, I will say that it appears that we agree on this issue. I agree that individuals who choose to as teachers should allow to be trained and certified within the public school systems and be in a place to defend their classrooms. You know, we've seen some horrific school shootings in this nation. We don't have even a resource officer in every school. Most of our public schools split resource officers. He's here half a day or there half a day. The possibility that such a tragedy could be averted because a teacher had been trained and armed themselves in North Carolina is, quite frankly, something I think that is very important to our children and to our school system.
Thank you, Ms. Somerville.
So here's my idea. Let's fund our public schools properly and effectively so we can have an SRO, a school resource officer, in every school to protect our students so that we don't have to ask our teachers to be armed. Because most teachers that I talk to and that you have heard from, they got in this profession to teach, not to be armed guards.
Thank you. Next question, we'll have one more on the schools, and then we'll shift to a different category. This one is, do you think charter schools should be held to the same standards as public schools? And if you believe they should be, how will you help make them as accountable as the public K-12, the regular K-12? And that will begin with Mr. Hunts. Mr. Hunts.
Thank you. I fully believe that charter schools should meet the same standards of academic performance that every public school, that they should be ranked and scored in the exact same manner that public schools are. Well, charter schools were actually started long before I was in by the Democrats in this state as an opportunity to say we will start 100 test programs that we will exempt from the regulations on education, whether that's from teacher certifications and others. And the lessons we will learn from those 100, we will eventually apply to the public schools. Well, we did learn a lot of lessons, and those never got applied to the public schools. We did learn that students can perform just as well when individuals that have professional experience are in the classroom, just as those who got a teacher certification. We did learn that individuals can build schools cheaper and operate them cheaper with more administrative efficiency if they're not following those state regulations. But rather than move those to public schools change, the unions have fought any of those changes, any challenges to their credentialing. So we've gone with expanding charter schools across the state. We've had a lot of very successful charter schools. But we have never answered the question of how any exist in rural communities. We don't have charter schools in rural communities unless they have an urban center close by that they can draw students from. But counties like Madison, Yancey, and Mitchell have never had the opportunity at a charter school within their communities because the population simply doesn't support it, neither would the funding levels.
Ms. Somerville?
Haywood County does have a charter school. It's called Shining Rock Classical Academy. And while I don't have a problem with charter schools, I think there is a place for charter schools. The problem began when those 100 charter schools that you were talking about, the cap was lifted. We had a cap on charter schools in the state of North Carolina. And in 2011, that cap was lifted. So charter schools could crop up anywhere in the state that they wanted to. And what that did was that took money away from our traditional public education. Like I said, I do not have a problem with charter schools. I think there is definitely a place for them. And every child does not need to go to the traditional public schools. Some need to be homeschooled. But our funding does not allow us in this state to support all the different public education schools that we have in North Carolina. And I will say, if you are going to take money from the state taxes that you and I pay, then yes, you do need to follow the same rules and regulations and be held accountable for the same things that our traditional public schools are held to.
Mr. Wheeler?
So charter schools have special rules. How fair is that to public schools? Not very. I, like Rhonda, don't have a problem with charter schools as long as they live up to the same rules that everybody else does, and they take the same students that public schools do. A lot of public schools are being burdened with the higher cost special ed students. Not burdened, but they're required to take them. Charter schools don't have to. So that cost is being dumped into the public school system. I do want to clarify a couple things Senator High said. He said that the unions are the reason for part of the problem. There are no unions in North Carolina, Senator. There's an association of teachers that works hard that you actually tried to penalize in an election because they came out with an ad against you. And there are 2 charter schools in rural district, Senator. There's 2 charter schools in Rutherford County. They're really well-performing schools. I'm not necessarily as probably knowledgeable about them as you are, but I do know there are 2 charter schools in the district. So at the end of the day, I think they do need to live by the same rules, and I'm absolutely opposed to for-profit charter schools. Shouldn't be taking tax money and educating kids and then making money off it, because we all know what happens then. They start cutting corners, and next thing you know, our kids aren't getting the education they need.
Thank you. We are going to shift to a different category. We are certainly aware that over now a number of months, the issues of district lines have been discussed and considered in the General Assembly a number of times, and by the courts a number of times, with the most recent ruling indicating that there needs to be some continual action. So this question goes first to Ms. Shonwall, and then to Mr. Wheeler, and then to Senator Heights. So actually I'm having to take 2 questions and put them together. When would you think this redistricting process would be completed, and your position relative for gerrymandering or redrawing the voting lines, as the writer of the question said, so they look more normal? So Ms. Shonwall, you can take your best shot at that, and then Mr. Wheeler, and then Senator Heights.
People, when are we going to stop doing this? Now, I hear all the time that, well, both parties have done it. Okay, both parties have done it. I don't think that it's been done with the precision that it has been done this last time. But we're spending our money that could be funding all these things that we're talking about, fighting these battles, when we could be spending money on our schools, on our health care. But we are constantly bickering about these lines. Let's draw these lines and let the voters choose who represents them, instead of letting our elected officials choose who votes them in.
Oh, that's me making all that noise. Sorry, Rhonda. Gerrymandering. Senator, I'm sorry, but you're the king of gerrymandering. You're the chairman of the committee. You're the chairman of the committee, and I guess if you're happy and proud of that, I guess you can be. That's your choice. I will not vote for any bill, whether the Democrats introduce it or not, that allows any more gerrymandering. If you have to cheat to win, you're not really, you shouldn't be representing us. So I'm opposed to gerrymandering. I think it should go to an independent commission. There are many states that have those models. And I think the days of gerrymandering should come to an end, and I will not support any bill to do that. I have no idea when it's going to get resolved. The senator certainly should know. Think about, and absolutely what Rhonda said is right, think about the millions of dollars that's going not to anybody but lawyers. And they hire outside lawyers all the time. So it's not like the Attorney General pulls the lawyers out of the hat in his office and goes and represents the state. The legislature's hiring these lawyers all the time. So I have a question. How many millions of dollars do you think we have spent on all these gerrymandering cases?
Senator Rice?
The U.S. Constitution gives the authority for drawing districts to the states through their legislature and to Congress. Now, I've never actually seen Congress draw maps, so that is given by the U.S. Constitution to the state legislature. It is our responsibility and it is our duty. We have seen maps for a long time in the state of North Carolina, a process that actually started with the 80s when the Voting Rights Act started being challenged, that our districts keep getting changed, whether they were Republican or Democrat. I will tell you the new standard is whether or not Democrats are winning is whether or not there's gerrymandering. They miss the fact that voters have rejected their message, and they want to blame it on maps. That's what's coming in. We took over in 2010 supermajorities in the state Senate under Democrat-drawn maps and have maintained them for nearly a decade. The Supreme Court will have to set parameters for drawing maps. I have rulings from the Supreme Court that says race must be used. There are rulings from the Supreme Court that say race cannot be used. And there's a lot of arguments about the extent to which race is used. So if it's a 40% district or a 45, then it's in. If it's more than that, it's out. So in Alabama, 80% was an excessive use of race, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. That's coming in. But there are no standards. There are merely lawsuits. And Republicans throughout districts and others for more than a decade by challenging in the legal system. And the new Democrat slogan has become "Sue till blue." When they can't win at the ballot box, they're going to win in the judicial, because it's where they control and it's where their philosophy is strong.
Thank you. Next question, we will begin with Mr. Wheeler. Across the state of North Carolina, there are some school boards that are partisan and some that are nonpartisan. Some have been changed in recent time. Some have not been changed in a very long time. Your position, each of you, on the issue of whether school boards should be partisan or nonpartisan. Mr. Wheeler?
I think the last thing we need is more partisanship anywhere. At the local level, what's next? We're going to start electing who fixes or who works for the DOT in our counties. I'm not a big fan of partisan elections. It's created cost. And the last thing we really need right now is more division. I am a firm believer that we have to start talking to each other, not talking through each other. And yeah, it can get heated. I think if you bring an argument to the table, there's nothing wrong with pounding the table, but stick to the facts, be respectful. And that's one of the things I want to bring to the table, is to get us to start talking to each other. I'd like to see, my goal is 2 town halls per county per year. The senator has had 0 town halls. 0. He's not talking to the school board members, he's not talking to county commissioners. If they're Democrats, I'm gonna talk to Democrats, Republicans, independents, and everybody and help get things done, whether it's a school board or the county commission. And I know for a fact that the senator, he knows your party, he won't talk to you. He won't do anything with you if you're a Democrat. Now that may be fine for him and it may be fine for his party, but I don't think that's what elected officials ought to be doing, and we certainly don't need any more partisanship at the local level.
Senator Heiss?
You know, I actually think it's comical and masticating my opponent would bring up party affiliations for who works at DOT. The Democrats in Madison County have only hired Democrats for the Department of Transportation and others for more than probably 60 years in Madison County. Only recently have you seen that anyone registered affiliation. When the Ponders were here and others, that was the absolute qualification for how you voted and whether you came out. We have picked select races and had the party affiliation of the individual. That's a little different than it being a partisan race. Partisan races would hold a primary that was coming through among the parties, and then whoever represents a party would go to the general election as we run for these offices in the General Assembly. But I do think it's important that you place someone's party affiliation on the ballot. A lot of voters go to the ballots and don't do a lot of research on who's voting and what they're voting for. They get handed the appropriate, blue card or yellow card when they walk in the door. And one of the things that we have felt helps educate voters is if a person has chosen a party affiliation, even for these school board races, that we would list that party affiliation on the ballot.
Ms. Underwood?
Well, first of all, we are divided enough. And our school board races were our school boards were one place where we weren't partisan. My opponent decided that it would be a good thing if our school boards were partisan. She, without consulting any school board in her district, any school board member, decided that she was going to make the school boards partisan. So, as it is, or as it was, Madison and Yancey did become partisan again. Haywood County, because we're represented by a different senator than Senator Heiss, we got out of it because Senator Jim Davis in Haywood County decided that it wasn't good for them to interfere in local politics. And so he signed off on the bill and got Haywood County out of it. Senator Heiss would not do that. So Madison and Yancey are now partisan school boards. In this last election, the Republicans didn't have a say in who was going to guide the future of their school system, because Madison County only had a Democratic school board chair race. And so the Republicans didn't have a voice in that. And people are very upset that the democratic process for at least this one thing was taken out of the hands of the people of Madison County. I will go to Raleigh and fix this problem. I sat on the school board in Haywood County. I know what it's like to work with Republicans and unaffiliated on the school board. We've got enough divisiveness. We do not need that in our school systems.
Thank you. Next question, and it will begin with Senator Heiss, again on the local election issue. Earlier this week, there was a discussion on in the commission candidate forum about fire districts and setting a fire district rates by the county commission. So the question is posed, it's stated, we are told that in-state statutes authorize only elected county commissioners and not individuals in the fire districts to have a position or make a decision about fire tax rates. Are you, as either a state senator or candidate for office, for or against this jurisdictional situation? And please explain your reasons why. Senator?
I guess I would say at first that's not entirely accurate.
Please.
As mayor of the town of Spruce Pine, I set a fire tax rate as part of our property tax rate that was allocated to the Spruce Pine Fire Department, and they were actually citizens in the town limits actually didn't pay the county fire tax. So there is a process by which local areas, but that would require them to come together and form the governmental authority of a municipality. So individual municipalities can set a fire tax rate, counties can set a fire tax rate, unincorporated areas that do not have a governing body or governing structure, that would default to the county commissioners to set their fire tax rate and their fire districts. But for incorporated areas, that's actually set as part of the budget of the towns.
Thank you. Michelle?
I'm really not sure that I could answer that question. I don't know enough about that to be able to answer that question. But I will tell you this, I will definitely look into that and find out, because I know that it's important and that we have to fund these, our fire departments, our EMS, we have to fund them properly. So I will definitely look into that.
Mr. Wheeler?
Sorry, Paul.
That's all right. That was pretty good. Let me reset my time. I'm just kidding, Mark, kidding. Fire tax zones, or whatever we're calling them. Counties need to set that. That's why we elect county commissioners. They need to make those decisions. I don't think we need to mess around with that. It's not. I agree with Senator Heiss. The last thing we need is more regulation on counties. I do want to point out one thing on firefighters, though. The senator over here was part of a budget that eliminated a $250 tax credit for volunteer firemen and women. Did you know that? These guys and women that run to the fire station to help us every single day of the week, on their own time, with their own gas, they had a tax credit yanked from them. I want to Rhonda and I are in agreement. We're going to introduce a bill to activate that tax credit again, because those folks need help, and again, they're on the front line, so let's help them. A couple other things. First of all, Mr. Ponder's in the room, Senator, and if he was illegally hiring folks, then you should have reported it to the district attorney, because it's illegal to hire people based upon party. So I realize you think that's funny, but if I ever hear of any nonsense or corruption like that, I don't care what party you're in, I'm going to report it to the district attorney and see that it's fixed, because corruption has no place in Madison County or anywhere else. And the other thing I wanted to say, Ralph Heiss talks about taxes in Spruce Pine. Well, he's supposed to be conservative, but he raised taxes in his county, or in his city when he was mayor. Now, I'm sorry to keep pointing on all these negative things, Ralph, but I have to remind you, because they're true.